She didn't ask for food or help, just stood there in the rain, guarding a row of Harleys like her life depended on it.
My foster mom says I lie about everything. Can you trust me?
By the time they found out the truth, one girl had rewritten what it means to be believed. The Night Wolves MC Open House was the kind of event that shook the quiet out of a Sunday. Rows of polished Harleys lined the parking lot like armored sentinels, their chrome catching the late afternoon sun. Music thumped from speakers set up near the grill, where ribs smoked on low heat and laughter spilled out of the clubhouse doors. Kids from the neighborhood ran wild through chalk-marked lanes while bikers handed out hot dogs, helmets, and high fives. That's when they saw her. She wasn't running around with the other kids, wasn't with any parent, just stood off to the side, near the bikes, hands in the pockets of a hoodie 2 sizes too big, shoulders hunched up to her ears like she was trying to disappear inside the fabric. Her hair was damp and stringy, clinging to her cheeks, and her shoes were the kind sold in dollar stores, soggy from the earlier drizzle. Wilson spotted her first from the clubhouse steps. As president, he had a radar for out-of-place things. She didn't belong to the crowd, didn't move with it, just stood staring at the bikes like they were works of art or a challenge. She chewed on the cuff of her sleeve and didn't flinch when Wilson approached. "You lost?" he asked gently, adjusting the toothpick in his mouth. She shook her head. "No, you hungry?" "No," he pointed at the row of Harleys. "You like bikes?" She nodded. "What's your name?" "Stella." "You here with anyone?" Another shake of the head. Then she cleared her throat and, in a voice so soft he had to lean in, she said, "Can I watch the bikes for you?" Wilson blinked. "You want to watch the bikes?" She nodded more firmly this time. "My foster mom says I lie about everything. I just want to do something right." Wilson glanced back at the line of bikes, then at her. There were 25 machines, each custom-built, worth thousands and brimming with pride. Normally, no outsider, especially not a kid, would be allowed near them. But something about her didn't feel like a risk, felt like a question. "You stand right there," he said. "You see anything weird, you come get me." She straightened up, lifted her chin an inch. "Yes, sir." That was it. She didn't wander, didn't sit, just stood guard. Hours passed. The rain came back in fits and starts, misting the air and dampening the asphalt. Someone tried to hand her a hot dog. She politely refused. One of the biker wives offered her a dry towel. She waved it off. People started asking Wilson who the girl was. He didn't answer, because he didn't know yet. She didn't flinch when teenagers ran past her playing tag. Didn't move when someone on a Sportster accidentally revved too close and sprayed gravel. She just kept her eyes on the line of bikes, arms folded now, sleeve chewed down to threads. Wilson wasn't the only one watching her anymore. Inside the clubhouse, Jules, mid-40s, quiet, built like a fallen oak, leaned near the pool table and muttered, "That girl hasn't moved in 2 hours." Colton, the club's sergeant-at-arms, snorted. "Probably wants cash. Wait till it's dark. She'll say she lost her mom in the crowd and needs bus fare." "Doesn't feel like that," Jules replied, eyes narrowing. By sunset, most of the guests had gone. Stella was still there. Wilson walked back out and stood beside her. "You can go home now. You did your job." She looked up, blinking rain out of her lashes. "Thank you." "You need a ride?" She shook her head. "I can walk." "You sure?" "I always walk." Wilson studied her for a long moment. She didn't ask for anything. Not once. He pointed to the side shed, where the club's tool inventory was a disorganized mess of wrenches, socket sets, jacks, and half-torn labels. "What would you do if we let you inventory that?" She hesitated for the first time. "Everything?" she asked. Wilson nodded. "Every last bolt. I'd start with sorting by function, then by size, then clean and label everything. Probably color code, too. I have markers." "You have markers?" She nodded. "In my backpack." He raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "I don't lie," she said, voice flat. "Not about this stuff." Wilson turned toward the clubhouse. "Be here tomorrow at 3. Bring your backpack." "Okay." "And Stella," he added, Don't touch anything sharp or heavy without checking with me. She gave a quick, efficient nod. Yes, sir. She walked off into the fog, quiet and deliberate, like someone used to leaving without being noticed. But Wilson stood at the edge of the lot long after she was gone, staring at the empty spot where she'd stood, like she'd guarded more than just steel and chrome. The next morning, the shed was still a disaster. No one expected her to actually return. At 3 p.m., she did. Same hoodie, same damp shoes, a worn backpack hanging off one shoulder. Wilson unlocked the tool shed. It's all yours. She stepped in, eyes scanning like a soldier assessing a battlefield. Jules walked by on his way to the garage and peeked inside. You really gonna let her mess with club tools? Wilson crossed his arms. No, I'm gonna let her organize them. Jules raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Wilson didn't answer. He was watching Stella already open the first drawer and pull out a pair of mismatched pliers. She laid them side by side on a rag and frowned. Jules tilted his head. You think she's telling the truth? Wilson nodded slowly. She didn't tell it with words. She stood in the rain for 6 hours and didn't blink. That's a different kind of truth. Colton scoffed behind them. Or a different kind of hustle. Wilson didn't even look at him. We'll find out soon enough. And they would. But not in the way anyone expected. By the end of her first week, Stella had been to the Night Wolves clubhouse 4 times. She didn't ask for rides, food, or money. She just showed up, quiet and consistent, carrying the same worn backpack with its frayed strap and a Ziploc full of color-coded tabs, markers, and a plastic ruler that had seen better days. Inside the tool shed, the chaos had started to vanish. Sockets were now separated by both metric and standard. Power tools were arranged by voltage. The grimy pegboard, once ignored, was now a labeled map of precision. Each drawer had a laminated index taped inside it, handwritten in block letters with tiny checkboxes. No one had asked her to do that. She did it anyway. On Friday, Wilson found her on a folding chair, kneeling to reach the lowest drawers, her pencil behind her ear. She looked up when she heard the creak of the door. I can't reach the top shelf, she said, already preempting any critique. I marked the missing items in red. I think they're torque wrenches. Wilson scanned the clipboard she handed him. Every item numbered, counted, and marked if damaged or misplaced. This is cleaner than our annual audit, he muttered. I like systems, she said, shrugging slightly. They don't lie. People say I make stuff up, but numbers don't. That sentence sat heavy in the air. Wilson didn't press. He just nodded and walked her out. You're done for today. But she didn't leave. She hovered near the garage, eyeing the row of bikes being tuned for an upcoming charity ride. Jules noticed first. You interested in engines? He asked, wiping oil off his hands. She tilted her head. I've only seen videos. Never touched one. He glanced around. Come on. She followed him toward a stripped-down Harley on the lift. You ever heard of a V-twin? He asked, handing her a pair of gloves too big for her fingers. She nodded. Pushrods. 2 cylinders at an angle. Air-cooled. Jules blinked, impressed. All right, Professor. Colton, who'd been watching from across the garage, rolled his eyes. She's not here to learn. She's casing the place. Stella stiffened, but Jules raised a hand. She's just curious. Colton leaned against the frame of the garage door. Curious kids ask questions. They don't stare holes through people and write lists like the IRS. Wilson stepped in before it escalated. She's earned her spot. Let her be. But Stella didn't forget Colton's words. The next day, she handed him a separate document. What's this? He grunted. Tool shed itemization, she said, almost robotically. I added serial numbers where I could reach them. Figured you'd want proof I'm not casing the place. He looked at her for a long time, then muttered, Still don't trust you. She didn't reply, just turned and walked back toward the clubhouse. That night, as the sun dropped behind the trees, a black pickup truck slowed at the edge of the lot. Stella was inside, helping Jules organize spark plugs by heat range when she went rigid. Jules noticed instantly. You okay? She stepped back, her voice tight. I have to go. Hold on, Jules followed her to the window just in time to see the pickup crawl past, the driver not stopping, but clearly looking. "You know that truck?" She didn't answer, just pulled her hoodie tight and headed for the side exit. Jules followed her outside. "Stella, I need to leave, please." He nodded, didn't press. But when she disappeared down the road, he found Wilson. Something's wrong. Later that night, the security footage was reviewed. The black pickup hadn't parked, hadn't done anything overt, but its slow roll past the clubhouse had an edge, like someone checking boundaries. "I think it's him," Jules said. "Whoever she's scared of." Wilson tapped his fingers against the table. "We need to find out what she's not telling us." They didn't have to wait long. On Sunday, Stella returned with a new list: missing consumables. She was halfway through explaining the gaps in oil stock when Wilson stopped her. "Stella," he said gently, "what's with the guy in the truck?" She hesitated, long enough for Wilson to know the answer mattered. "Please don't make me stop coming," she whispered. "We're not going to do that. But if someone's looking for you..." "He wasn't looking for me. He was with my foster brother. They take cash from the cabinets sometimes. From my foster mom's boyfriend's truck." I told her. She said I made it up. She says I lie about everything. Wilson's jaw tensed. Jules stepped closer, arms crossed. "You ever tell the school?" "I tried. They called my caseworker. She said I had an imagination problem." "Did you ever tell anyone about anything else?" Wilson asked carefully. Stella stared at the ground. Her voice was so small it nearly vanished in the clatter of the garage. "He touches things he shouldn't. Sometimes when Mom's asleep." I told her. She said I was trying to ruin everything. Jules looked away, his jaw clenched. Wilson was already reaching for his phone. "Would you be okay talking to someone outside the system?" he asked. She looked up, suspicious. "Like who?" "Like a friend of ours. She used to work child services. Now she works for herself." "I already told people," she muttered, defeated. "They don't believe me." "Well," Wilson said, his voice steady, "we do." That night, Wilson called Rachel Davies, a former investigator turned private advocate. She agreed to meet Stella in the garage the next afternoon. Stella arrived early, standing beside the old vending machine. When Rachel walked in, jeans, leather jacket, gray streak in her hair, and a badge-shaped scar over her collarbone. Stella didn't smile, but she didn't run either. They spoke for an hour in the back office. Wilson, Jules, and even Colton kept their distance. When they emerged, Rachel handed Wilson a folder. She remembers details most adults miss. If half of what she said is verifiable, we've got a pattern. Colton, ever skeptical, asked, "You think she's telling the truth?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "She's not just telling it. She's proving it." That evening, Stella stayed late, labeling one last drawer in the tool shed. She held up the clipboard. "Everything's accounted for, except the things I couldn't reach." Wilson smiled. "That's okay. We'll build you a stool." And then he handed her something she hadn't expected. A key, not to a motorcycle but to the storage locker. "You've earned this," he said. She stared at it, stunned. "Why?" she asked. "Because you told the truth with your hands." He paused. "And that's worth more than words." It started with a ledger. Not a real one, just a blank composition notebook Wilson handed to Stella the following Monday morning. Its cover was soft and black, the kind sold in bulk during back-to-school season. She ran her fingers over it before flipping it open, eyes narrowing with curiosity. "This isn't for the tool shed," she said. "Nope," Wilson replied, sliding a chair out for her at the corner desk in the garage office. "This one's for numbers, cash flow, inventory, snack machine, donations, anything that moves in or out of here." She hesitated, pencil already hovering over the first page. "Why me?" "Because I trust you to notice what others miss." Stella nodded. That was all she needed. For the next week, Stella worked from the desk between bike runs and parts deliveries. She created columns and categories, wrote line totals, and cross-referenced stock movements. When Colton shorted the vending machine $5 to grab a quick lunch, Stella made a quiet note, circled the discrepancy, and taped a sticky note on the register. Please reconcile, Row D. Colton grumbled when he saw it. You accusing me of stealing soda? No, Stella said without looking up. You just forgot to pay. She's got you there, Jules muttered. Colton narrowed his eyes, but said nothing. He paid the $5. Meanwhile, Rachel Davies returned with updates. Her follow-up with Stella's school and caseworker confirmed what the club feared. This wasn't the first time Stella had raised red flags, and every time, she'd been dismissed. She's in a system that decided she was troubled early, Rachel explained to Wilson and Jules one night in the back room. Once that label sticks, no one listens, especially not when there's money involved. What kind of money? Wilson asked. The family gets paid per foster child. Reports cost them income. They call it sabotage. Even when there's proof, there hasn't been. Until now. Wilson leaned forward. So what do we do? Rachel smiled tightly. We build the kind of case no one can ignore. Stella was already doing that without being asked. She'd added a discrepancy log to the back of her ledger. Not just notes from the clubhouse, but things she remembered from home. The times her foster brother took cash from the babysitter's purse. How the black pickup truck pulled into the back alley when their mom was sleeping. Where the keys were hidden. What drawer the cash box was in. One night, she placed the notebook on Wilson's desk without a word. He read it in silence, his jaw tightening as he flipped through each page. She mapped where things happened. Who was there? When? Wrote it all down. I'm not lying, she said. I just remember things people don't want me to. The night wolves called in backup. Leon Garvey, a retired school principal and longtime friend of the club, offered to help. He'd worked in juvenile advocacy for years and had dealt with cases where kids were wrongly labeled as disruptive or dishonest. She's brilliant, Leon said after reviewing her notes. The kind of mind that remembers details most adults forget. But that's exactly why she's dangerous to the people around her. He agreed to testify about her credibility. Meanwhile, Jules was working his own angle. He remembered the black pickup, how it slowed near the clubhouse. So he pulled surveillance from the nearby gas station, cross-referenced license plates, and found the driver listed as a friend of Stella's foster brother. A known petty thief. No convictions, but plenty of warnings. Is that enough? Colton asked. No, Jules replied. But it's a start. That weekend, the club staged a small experiment. They placed a $20 bill partially visible inside the vending machine's change slot, then left it unattended for a few hours. When Colton's nephew, who was visiting for the day, grabbed it and slipped it into his pocket, Stella didn't say a word. She didn't accuse him, didn't glare. She simply reached for her pencil and wrote a note. $20 missing from machine, unverified retrieval. When Colton read it later, he asked her, "Why didn't you say something?" Because writing it down means it can't be argued with later. He stared at her for a long moment, then finally and quietly muttered, "You're not like other kids." The case file grew thicker. Rachel compiled Stella's notes, photos, financial records, and statements from club members. They even had a signed affidavit from Stella detailing everything, written in her own words. Still, she practiced reading it aloud every night with Jules. "I'm not good at this," she said, voice flat. "You're better than you think," Jules answered. "And you're not alone up there." He meant the courtroom, but he also meant the table beside her, the club jackets in the front row, and the dozens of hands ready to catch her if she stumbled. Even Colton, now silent during these readings, sat nearby pretending to sort tools while listening. One evening, Stella approached Wilson, notebook in hand. "I added one more thing," she said. He opened to the last page. It wasn't a chart or a list. It was a single sentence, written in block letters. "If this doesn't work, it doesn't mean I was lying." Wilson's voice caught in his throat. He looked up, saw her eyes not filled with fear, but exhaustion. "You've done more than anyone ever asked," he said. "And whatever happens, that truth stays yours." The date was set. Court, testimony, cross-examinations. But none of that was what Stella was thinking about the night before. She was at the garage, cleaning out a plastic drawer filled with mismatched bolts. when Colton came up behind her and held out something wrapped in a cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. It was a small brass nameplate. "Stella, Ledger Queen," she blinked. "It's for the drawer," he said gruffly. "You've earned it." She smiled barely but didn't say a word. Instead, she reached into her backpack, pulled out a roll of tape, and stuck the nameplate dead center on the desk's front drawer. That was her spot now. And tomorrow she'd speak, not to prove she was brave, but to prove she'd always been right. The courtroom wasn't large. No marble pillars, no echoing footsteps, just pale wood, flickering fluorescent lights, and a judge whose reading glasses slid down her nose as she skimmed case files. Stella sat at the front table in a pressed gray sweater, sleeves tugged low over her palms. Her composition notebook, now worn soft at the corners, rested on her lap. She didn't hold it like a weapon, more like armor. Behind her, 3 members of the Night Wolves sat in full colors. Wilson in his usual calm silence, Jules with his arms crossed like a shield, and Colton, stiff as a board, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, but still there, still watching. Rachel stood beside Stella, legal file in hand, but she wasn't the one drawing the room's focus. It was the girl who wouldn't stop writing, wouldn't stop counting, wouldn't stop remembering. The judge cleared her throat. "Miss Stella Carr, do you wish to make a statement before we proceed?" Stella stood. Her legs wobbled. She gripped the table edge. "I do." She didn't look at the foster mom. Didn't look at the boy beside her, slouched in a collared shirt like it itched. She looked straight ahead. "My name is Stella. I'm 12. They say I make things up, that I twist the truth. But I don't. I just pay attention. I write things down because when I say them out loud, people think I'm lying. So I started writing everything. And then I came to a place where people didn't ask me to explain. They just watched what I did." She held up her notebook. "This is how I remember. Not with stories, but with details. Numbers, sketches, places no one else looked. If something in here is wrong, it's because I couldn't reach the top shelf. I did not make it up." She looked at the judge then, quiet, still. "I'm not a liar. I just needed someone to listen." Silence settled over the room like a heavy coat. Rachel handed over the case file. Leon Garvey gave a brief but passionate statement about Stella's intelligence and observational skills. Jules submitted surveillance images and testimony. Wilson didn't speak at all, but his presence, upright and steady, said more than words. The foster mom, red-faced and sharp-voiced, objected to nearly every page. Claimed the club had gotten in her head. Accused Stella of manipulation, of being obsessed with control. But the words fell flat. They were loud, defensive, circular. The judge flipped through the ledger again. Paused at a page titled Drawer 3, Things That Don't Add Up. Then she looked at Stella and said, "You built this by yourself?" Stella nodded. "And you memorized most of it?" "Yes, ma'am." The judge tapped her pen, thinking. Well then, it wasn't dramatic. No theatrics. Just paper, a ruling, and a quiet shift that changed everything. And an order for immediate placement under emergency custody, with Morgan Davies, Rachel's cousin and a retired social worker who rode her own Softail and ran a small ranch 2 towns over. When the courtroom emptied, Stella didn't move at first. Just stood near the bench, notebook clutched to her chest. Wilson walked over. "You did good, kid." She looked up. "Does this mean it's over?" "No," he said gently. "It means it's finally beginning." Life with Morgan wasn't a fairy tale. There were rules, routines, early mornings mucking out horse stalls. But there was also trust, quiet. A shelf in Morgan's office labeled Stella's Tools, where she kept her notebooks, extra ledgers, and new pens. Morgan watched her fill out the inventory log one evening. "You don't have to fix everything, you know?" she said softly. Stella didn't answer, just kept writing. Morgan smiled. "But if you do, we'll need a bigger ledger." The Night Wolves didn't disappear. Once a week, someone dropped by, usually Jules, to check in and bring her lunch from the clubhouse. Colton never visited alone, but whenever he came, he brought something small. A label maker, a set of metallic Sharpies, a roll of numbered tags. One afternoon, She handed him a sticky note. Burger count off by 2, suspect, you. Colton read it, grunted a laugh, and shook his head. She's learning. The school things changed too. Stella joined the student supply team and reorganized the inventory so precisely that the janitor offered her a part-time stipend. By winter break, she had her own key to the school supply room. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it was subtle and real, like the kind of smile that grows from relief. 3 months after court, the Night Wolves hosted another open house. Kids, bikes, burgers, music, just like before. Only this time, the girl wasn't standing by the bikes in the rain. She was at a folding table near the clubhouse door, clipboard in hand, assigning volunteer stations and supply counts. Wilson passed by and raised an eyebrow. You taking over my event? Stella didn't look up. You said to manage inventory. Colton, walking by with a tray of burgers, snorted. You give her one clipboard and she's got half the crew reporting to her. Jules chuckled. Give it time. She glanced at them all and, just barely, smirked. Later that day, a younger kid wandered near the bikes and asked if he could help watch. Stella looked at him carefully. Nervous posture, frayed hoodie, hands in pockets chewing a sleeve. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small clipboard. Start by counting the spokes, she said. The kid blinked. All of them. And when he nodded and got to work, she turned back to the table, pulling out a fresh sheet, labeling the top with block letters. Volunteer 02, probationary. She was building something, not a ledger, not just trust. A system that didn't lie because it watched, waited, and believed. This story reminds us that some truths can't be spoken, they have to be shown. Stella didn't just ask to be trusted. She proved it one small act at a time. What would you do if a child told you they weren't lying, just unheard? Comment below, and if this moved you, give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories like this. See you in our next video.